Kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome to 2026, New Year's Day today when I'm recording this. I'm recording the sermon for this coming Sunday, the 4th. But I thought I'd first like to start in the way of some explanatory notes about the liturgy we use here at St. Luke's. As I realise it's quite different from other churches, particularly other Presbyterian churches. And in January we have the gift of 5 different congregations coming together to worship and learning some of the liturgical riches of each of us. So firstly, about our liturgy, the voluntaries, the organ voluntaries that start and end our services at St. Luke's. These are not background mood music as we enter and leave, nor are they performances that show the organist's skill. Rather, like a Buddhist prayer bell, this music helps to center us, to leave aside the busy clutter of worries and demands, and try to be still, opening our hearts to God, who is in all, through all, among, between, and more. Secondly, the peace, the passing of the peace, te mogarongo. This comes towards the beginning of our liturgy. It's not merely an opportunity to turn and greet our neighbour or someone new, nor is it a time to make peace with someone we have wronged or has wronged you or me. These things are, of course, important, but this is not what this part of the liturgy is about. Rather, the peace is saying that through God and Christ, all barriers that divide people from each other have been overcome. When we clasp hands, hug, or bow to one another, we are recognizing the divine that is in the other person. They are of God. They are God's beloved. Usually we just greet those around us as representative of all those in the building. It's important for people who are visiting or who find groups of people unsettling to only participate to the extent they wish. And we need to respect the degree of physical touch that each person considers appropriate. If unsure, ask. The peace holds before us a vision of peace. Different from each other, we can come together. Disagreeing with each other, we can come together. Diverse and divergent we may be, but the more fundamental truth is that we are all embraced, recognized, and belong in the heart of God. Thirdly, I'd like to draw your attention to the affirmation of faith, he tinganga whakapongo. This is not a belonging statement or one loaded for doctrine, like the authorized affirmations of General Assembly. This affirmation of faith doesn't ask you to agree with it. And please, if there's a line or two you can't say, don't. It is simply one attempt to express some of the important things to the practice of our faith in the world. What faith might look like outside the doors of the church. What we do with our hands and hearts rather than what we think with our heads. Fourthly, language for God. All such language is poetic attempts to express the inexpressible mystery and wonder of God. And all such language is thus provisional, a product of its time. So in our liturgy you'll find language for God you're familiar with and some you're not. In the old hymns, like the one we started the service with, you'll find words for God like King and Lord, Words that today struggle to escape their feudal patriarchal lineage. You'll find some prayers with no God word in them at all. Like the old Celtic prayer, may the blessing of light be upon you. And you'll find words that you might not have thought of as a name for God before. Like in the Jesus prayer following intercessions, which addresses God as creative and kin, rather than creator and mother, father. And lastly, the blessing, te manakitanga. In olden times and in many churches today, the blessing is understood as God's blessing us, as God blessing us through the intermediary of a priest or minister. Presbyterianism doesn't hold to that understanding. God works through each of us to bless one another, no matter how holy or not we may feel or are. This blessing in the liturgy today, like others we use at St. Luke's, invites us to open our eyes to notice God all around, within, touching us with beauty, grace and hope, eliciting in us a deep thankfulness and provoking us to join in being builders, makers, weavers of more beauty, grace and hope. So when we respond with a sung Amen, we are both affirming our gratitude for the good we see and know, and our commitment to make more of it. Secondly, in our service today, I will read a children's story. It's by McDonald. It's called The Not So Wise Man, Ashtar. And he thinks that wisdom is found in travelling light, travelling alone, refraining from socializing and putting up signs like no room in order to get some peace, but ironically missing the Prince of Peace. Ashtar thinks that a king couldn't be born in a barn, whereas the author, McDonald, using the medium of humour, is affirming the opposite, or rather that wisdom is always both and. So McDonald's story tells us that wisdom is learnt from and with others, in company, in communion. Wisdom is found among unlikely people, so barriers to keep strangers and their needs away, like no room signs, might be keeping wisdom, even God, away. Wisdom can be found unexpectedly in places we hadn't thought of, like a barn. Wisdom is being open to the nudgings and surprisings of God. Note the pictures in McDonald's book owe more to the likes of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow and his 1870s poem The Three Kings than anything remotely historical. In my reflection, the story of the Magi, one we are all familiar with and of which poems, tales and children's books abound, should remain outside the constraints of popular history. For when earnest fact-finders go looking for astronomical oddities that might explain the star, or evidence that three wise men, or were they kings, came riding on camels, or were they horses, we have taken a road to nowhere. By the way, fun facts. The Bible text does not mention the word three, wise, men, or camels. What it does say is Magi, also known as Zoroastrians, an ancient faith which is still practiced today, not Jewish, not Christian. And that's another fun fact. The text says there's nothing about these Magi converting to Judaism or what anachronistically could be called Christianity. Note, it is possible that the writer of the Bible text was using the term Magi more broadly as seer, so you could argue that means wise. What is universally agreed on, though, and is important for Matthew's thesis, is that these visitors were strangers, foreigners from afar. But the story of the Magi, I believe, should remain outside of thinking facts and did it and how did it happen. Instead, continue, as I believe it always has, to mythically challenge us to go on a journey ourselves. What are our boundaries to cross? Are they of faith, culture, comfort? To follow a star? What is the star that shines for us that others can't see, that twinkles in our hearts, that calls to us? To go on a journey avoiding the machinations of those who see only with the lens of power, control, and violence. The Herods and their proteges. To go on a journey to find hope in the most unlikely, unsanitary, and unsafe of places. Among the most unlikely people, poor, not married, outsiders. And there at the stable of our discomfort and discombobulation. Whoops, somebody's trying to ring me. Right, that's sometimes you do recordings and you forget to turn off the phone. You know, it happens. And there, as I was saying, at the stable of our discomfort and discombobulation, obey our hearts, bend our knees in the knowledge that we ultimately know nothing. There, in that state of humility, offer what we have and are, our worship. The first reading in the liturgy today, Te Pānui Tahi, is the well-known poem by Robert Frost. It's published in 1915 when Europe was engulfed in World War I. The United States would enter a year later. While this poem, called The Road Less Travelled, is often interpreted as a celebration of individual choice, as M. Scott Peck does, the poem is actually a subtle, self-depreciating look at how people rationalize choices, suggesting the paths were nearly identical, and the difference is a story told later. Kind of like how war gets talked about later. The two paths that met in the woods, they look remarkably similar, save that one path at first shows signs of wear, being travelled more often. But the speaker then revises this. They were worn really about the same, he later says. The decision, therefore, was based on an impulse, a hunch, an intuitive leaning. Maybe in this light we might consider that it all began for the Magi with a hunch, a nudge, from their God-given intuition. Then, as Frost says, way leads on to way. Sometimes taking a wrong turn, like visiting Herod. Sometimes taking a right turn, like visiting the stables out back. But journeying on. Christine Paintner, in reflecting on the Magi tale, offers 7 spiritual guiding stars, a Pleiades, Matariki if you like. Firstly, follow the hunch in your heart. As you stand under a dark sky of unknowing, which star is shimmering? Which direction is your heart nudging you in? Secondly, embark on the journey, however long or difficult. The character Herod, in contrast, gathers all his chief priests and scribes to find out more about this holy birth, instead of searching for himself. He even sends the Magi on his behalf, as if you can have a surrogate for the spiritual journey. Thirdly, open yourself to wonder along the way. The scriptures tell us that Magi were overjoyed at seeing the star. And I'd like to imagine them practicing this kind of divine wonderment all along the journey. Wonderment echoes with those poetic words from the Wisdom of Solomon. For while gentle silence enveloped all things, the night in its swift course was half spent. Thy all-powerful love leapt from heaven, from the royal throne. Fourth, sometimes we meet holiness, where all reasoning, all conditioning and teaching tells us it shouldn't be. The Magi enter the stinky, muddy manger. Yes, think animal poo. And the text says they bow down and prostrate themselves. Really? And prostration is an act of humility and honor, as well as it's a full-body connection with the earth in all its muckiness. Fifth, travel light. Possessions we cling to can weigh us down. When we are confronted by a need or simply a desire to give, then surrender to that need or desire. Gold, frankincense and myrrh, symbols of sovereignty, supplication and suffering, may not be what we have in our kete. Yet we may have something even more precious. Not that it's a competition. More precious to let go of. It's the letting go that's important. Along with the full body connection with the earth, these make for worship. 6. Keep listening to the wisdom of dreams, the wisdom of your intuition. The Magi are warned in a dream not to return to Herod, and they pay heed to this night wisdom. Lastly, after receiving the gift of the dream, the Magi choose another way home. In truth, after any journey of significance, there's no going back the same way before. We always return with new awareness. I close with Longfellow's, this is Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's delightful opening verse of his poem, a poem that has shaped a lot of how Western culture understands the Magi. And I would quote it because it's a tribute to the ongoing mythos of the Magi, the mythos they've invoked. Note for equestrian lovers, Longfellow's kings rode horses, not camels. 3 kings came riding from far away, Melchior and Gaspar and Balthasar. 3 wise men out of the east were they, and they travelled by night and they slept by day, for their guide was a beautiful, wonderful star. Happy Epiphany.